We do in the shadows. Eagle versus shark. Boy.
Can I post that picture of you and Walter recording together?
Sure.
Just getting brunch with these pig dicks.
Will you send me the picture that you took from behind where I'm holding him?
This is the one I want to post.
Cool.
Oh,
Yeah, good.
All right, I'll do that later.
Send that one to me.
Right now?
Yes.
No, I want. We gotta record this.
I know, but just quick send. I'm not gonna post it. Just send it to me.
Man,
The one from behind.
stop saying the one from behind.
I know. I keep looking at you, and you're like.
I'm trying not to react to
I
it because
can
it's
see
too. The fruit is hanging so low; it's on the fucking ground.
Welcome to SVU Pod, Especially Heinous. I'm Gabe.
I'm Tasha.
We are on episode 15, Uncivilized. Uncivilized.
Season 1, episode 15. We are getting there.
Yeah.
Before we start, I want to start doing this for every episode, okay? Because I know that we say, hey, we put the trigger warnings in the notes, but we're going to start our episodes with our trigger warnings. Now, this episode, pedophilia, child murder, traumatic descriptions. You don't want to hear that? Fucking turn the shit off.
SVU stuff. Run-of-the-mill SVU stuff.
SVU stuff, but like some SVU episodes, like we'll talk about it, but some SVU episodes, I'm like, I'm down for this shit and I can make a million jokes during this episode. And some of them, we'll see how it goes. But it's the content makes it real fucking somber, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, those are the trigger warnings. So,
even
strap in for some fun, guys.
We open with the crime scene. Benson and Stabler are at a park. It's taped off. There's police everywhere. The victim is an 8-year-old boy named Ryan Davies. He was reported missing like 40 hours earlier. There's a couple of traumatized little boys that found him while chasing a ball into the trees.
Oh my God, I know.
I know, and they were like good little actors. They were like looking down. Well, first of all, like, where are their parents? Like,
Yeah.
you know, they shouldn't even be questioning kids without their parents there.
Oh,
after
that's
this
true.
Traumatic. So the kid
They're
was
probably at craft services. But anyway.
Yeah. The kid was assaulted,
Mm-hmm.
he was raped, strangled, and buried in a shallow grave. Stabler seemed to be having like kind of a hard time with
He had
opening
quite the
bag and
episode
stuff.
as a father.
Yeah, he's got some dad stuff going on there.
Yeah, when he was crouched down, he was about to unzip the body bag and he like hesitated for a super long time, made eye contact with Olivia, got himself the strength from his amazing partner, and then went ahead with it.
Right.
This job would fucking kill me.
Yeah. They go to the Davies house, Benson and Stabler, and they have to tell them that their son is dead, and it's really sad. And
A mom's nightmare, a dad's nightmare.
yeah, they're at the precinct, and Olivia mentions that everybody has a hard time with like child death stuff. Mm-hmm. Ryan was found naked from the waist down. He had ligature marks around his neck from a hand, it looked like at first.
Right.
A hand, and bruises covering his entire body.
Stabler's sitting there looking at photos of Ryan Davies, like soccer pictures and stuff.
You know.
Oh.
So there was no sign of a struggle, no weapons, and no evidence. The last time the parents had seen him was after school. He went to a comic book shop looking for Pokemon cards.
Yeah.
And he never made it there. Also,
So Cassidy's there. Yeah.
So,
So
oh my God, we said it at the same time.
we haven't brought this up for a minute, but we're following the Amazon timeline, which is not the same as what you're going to find on IMDb. So on Amazon, this is episode 15. Clearly, it's been mixed up. One, because we found that on the internet that it was mixed up, but also
Cassidy's back.
Cassidy like slunked away a few episodes ago because his heart was too big
This sounds like the first episode of when he starts to...
of that progression.
yeah. Because
Yeah.
all of a sudden he left, and we're like, oh.
So also there is a huge marsh around this park, so they're going to comb it for evidence.
Yeah. Jeffrey says she'll check out all the adults in the victim's life and look around for registered sex offenders in the area.
And then Cassidy says, transporting the body, leaving it exposed, hallmarks of a stranger.
Cragen sends everyone to canvass the neighborhood.
And Stabler is affected. Like,
Yeah.
they're just going to keep cutting to Stabes struggling. Munch and Cragen are outside the school talking to Girl Scouts selling cookies with their moms. And this little girl that they talk to looks so familiar. Like, I've seen her as an adult. The dark-haired girl with the bangs
and the glasses.
She looked so fucking familiar, and I couldn't place her. So she tells Cassidy that older boys, Mike D and Jimmy G, had maybe hurt Ryan.
Should we be them for Halloween?
I call Mike D.
Good, because I want to wear that earring.
Okay, cool, because I want to look like the ShamWow guy.
Holy shit. Holy shit.
Okay, so Munch and Cassidy then cut to the park. They go up to this kid who looks like the guy in a 90s era after school special offering free heroin to 11-year-olds.
Yeah, he does.
Lanky, backwards hat. Ooh, this dude is trouble in this time period. But also now that I just thought of that, and also the ShamWow guy. So this is the ShamWow guy in high school.
Yeah.
Munch is like, you Jimmy G? And he's like, I'm Mike D. Who wants to know? And I'm like, we need to put an asterisk here and say not the cool Beastie Boy, but the flaccid tough guy Mike D.
Yeah.
So he's like, who wants to know? And then Munch is like, badge flash, and just like shows him his belt, the cool cop way to do it. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden here comes a bowl cut hoop earring with a skateboard. All the late 90s signs of a troublemaker.
Yep.
Sup.
Ugh.
This must be Jimmy G, I say to myself. So Jimmy G was a neighbor of Ryan Davies. Mm-hmm. And Munch gets all munchy. And I love when he does this to punky young dick dudes, you know? Munch is talking shit to Mike D. And Mike D's like, don't patronize me. And Munch is like, actually, it's patronize. Mm-hmm. Normally, I would hate that.
He also does it like look over
He
the glasses.
looks over his So they tell him about a weird dude who's been riding around on his bicycle for about a month. He's an older guy. He hangs around the park. His last name is Turbot, and he lives on Linwood Street. Mm-hmm. The detectives are walking away, and Mike D yells, hey, I thought Men in Black sucked.
First of all, it didn't, but okay.
Right? And Munch comes back, and he sighs. I mean, yes, own this guy, but like, I didn't get this.
I have 3 question marks
Okay.
on my notes.
He goes, better than appropriating black culture for your own bad self. At least be original.
Yeah, I think it was because he was wearing his hat backwards because he took it off and put it on him
Right.
front.
Or is it like because he's attempting like being cool or something?
No, it was
Or-
the hat.
It was the hat.
Yeah, and I think back then wearing your hat backwards was like a stereotypical black guy thing.
I don't understand. So then anyway, Cassidy finger guns him. And
Yeah, there was a finger gun thing. I was like, get out of here, you guys.
Pew pew. Okay, so Benson and Stabler are at the apartment of Bill Turbot, the guy
weird.
that the skateboard kids tell him about.
Yeah, he's weird.
He is. He tells them about how he rides his bike by the park, and they're like, why do you ride your bike over there? And he
The
has
sense of history. You're like, get the what?
he has extensive white guy knowledge of parks.
Yeah.
And they give him shit because he rides around the area where the kids play at the playing field. And I make note that this dude is a little odd.
Yeah.
Okay, but they're asking a lot of questions about being at the park and whatever. And he's like, oh, it must seem strange, like a grown man being in an area where there's a lot of little kids and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, we're just going to put a pin in that, okay?
Yeah. I also think it's not that weird to ride home on your bike through a park.
It's not, but it's SVU. So they're like, oh. Also, I think they're pressing him a little bit.
Stabler almost set his drink down on his stamp collection. He like lost his shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just they're setting up that
He likes stamps.
this
Like a lot.
dude seems like an isolated loner, kind of weirdo. I feel sorry for him.
Right.
Kind of dude at this point. Like they want you to feel bad for him. They want you to be conflicted throughout this episode.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So Benson and Stabler are leaving his apartment. Oh, here's his bicycle that he was all jacked about. And they're like, let's take samples of the dirt on the bicycle tires to see if it matches up with the field where Ryan was found.
Which it is going to because
That dude rides his bike around there.
he like literally said it. So now they're at the precinct. They're kind of talking about how weird Turbot was. Forensics is working on the dirt from the bike. Mike D and Jimmy G placed Turbot at the park at 5 p.m., which is the time of Ryan's death. If they have a positive ID, they can get a warrant to search Turbot's apartment. This is also weird because the boys knew what he looked like, knew his name, and had to pick him out in a lineup. Like,
Knew his fucking address.
yeah, I was like, why do you need the lineup for? I don't know.
There's a lot of stuff in this episode in particular where I was like, wait a minute. It's a loosely knitted storyline.
Right. They're in the interrogation room. Turbot tells them that on Friday night, when Ryan disappeared, around that time, he was at the tavern.
Which I thought, because he's like a super nerdy guy, I'm like, can you not call it's a bar? Like
Yeah.
you were at the bar. Turns out that's the name of the bar.
Yeah.
It's called the Tavern. But I was like,
I know. I
stop
was
using
like,
weird words for stuff that everybody knows.
yeah, like, I was at the pub. You're like, shut up. We're not in London. Stabler asked him if he was seen by anyone at the tavern and why he was there. He said he had just acquired the inverted Jenny, which is a stamp. I ended up doing a bunch of research on this. I'm not going to go into it. It's a stamp that got misprinted upside down. There's like 100 of them. They're like really sought after. It was when the USPS was like really starting to play with the idea of like using airplanes to deliver mail and stuff. And it's like a whole thing. So they really wanted to get it out super fast. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't. But Gabe was like really wanting to talk about the inverted Jenny.
Well, the planes are really... the plane, because there's these airplanes called the Jenny, and they were like pretty much like the backbone of like, they just did a ton of shit, and they were in World War I and could do all this stuff, and it was just
Also,
cool.
we're moving our platform to NPR, so sorry.
But no, let's do a chaser on dead children and child molesters.
Oh my God.
I can talk about an upside down plane. Okay, hold on. Why am I? Oh, the stamps. Oh, we forgot to say.
Anyway, like I was saying, it was 1944.
So he had just acquired this stamp, the inverted Jenny. I just told you about it. And so he went to the tavern to celebrate.
He was drinking a black and tan, which, yum.
Yeah.
Okay.
They asked him if they knew Ryan, and he was like, who? He said that he was at the tavern playing cards with some dudes he didn't know. He doesn't know their names because he usually keeps to himself.
So then Jeffries fucking shablams the door open, and she's like, hey, I need to talk to you.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. She found 9 registered sex offenders in that area. Cragen says that only 1 matched this case. Fucking
The
Turbot.
MO. Yeah.
Turbot was arrested 10 years prior. He does all of his registration shit. He served his time, whatever.
Stabler is like getting agitated and saying like, what did he do?
Yeah.
What did he do? And keeps asking what he's convicted for. And he was in prison for child molestation of a boy 2 months older than Ryan Davies.
Right. So
And I'm sorry, it wasn't just like molestation.
I know.
Yeah.
This is the part.
This is like the weird. This
This is where I get to like, okay, let's go back to when you guys were originally questioning him. First of all, you usually do research on people before you talk to them, right? You have this guy's name. You don't look up to see if he has a record. Secondly, he's in the sex offender registry. It takes barely a click to get this information on this guy. And you have his name from the cool guys that hang out at the park.
but the clicks were a lot longer back then.
I guess.
No.
And then also, here's the other thing. Look at me pick this apart. What a fucking nerd. I'm the munch of going over this episode right now. I'm gonna look at you over my glasses.
Over my
for the rest
transistor
of the
glasses.
But then when they were questioning him, they were like, oh, why do you go through the park and kids and blah, blah, blah. Nobody, including this guy who's registers and follows the letter of the law, doing everything that he has to do to like be a registered sex offender, says anything about like, so I guess you guys are asking me this because I'm a sex offender. Like nobody says any of that.
Yeah, even at his house.
Wouldn't you go back into the room where Turbot's sitting after like being nervously questioned and be like, hey, dude, why didn't you say shit about being a fucking registered sex offender for molesting a kid? Mm-hmm. Right? I don't know. That is not an issue with the case as if we were like diving into this being reality. This is my issue with I can't follow the storyline because none of these things make sense.
Right. Those are the times when it becomes painfully aware that you're watching a TV show and not like a bunch of cops doing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cut to craziness in the streets in front of Turbot's apartment. There's parents out there freaking out. This brick shithouse, Conan O'Brien, is pissed.
Holy shit, that's a good, yeah.
He is pissed that they let a sex offender in their area. And he's like, I let my kid be alone with him. Why? Why are you letting your kid be alone with an adult man? I can't parent shame, but a lot of this stuff, I'm like, there's a reason I'm a helicopter mom.
Yeah. They're like, why didn't you tell us?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're supposed to go door to door when a sex offender moves in. I think within a certain amount of blocks, once they register, they have to like go door to door and tell families or tell the neighbors.
Yeah. And the lady was like, he lured my daughter into his house with a stamp collection. And I was like, no, nobody's ever been lured anywhere by a stamp. You know what I mean?
I don't know, Gabe. You were pretty interested in that inverted Jenny.
Gotta get that inverted Jenny. I wonder how much they are. I'm wondering because it was 24 cents when it came out. Which
But it wasn't in good condition, but quite a steal.
Yeah. End quote. And scene.
I wanted to come for these parents with like a battery of jokes, but then I'm just like, it feels like really parent shamey to parents who like whose kids have been abused.
Yeah.
No parent fucking wants that to happen to their kid. No decent parent, no human
Nobody does.
parent
Yeah.
wants that to happen to their child. So back at the precinct, Benson and Stabler and Cragen are sitting down with the precinct captain from Bill Turbot's neighborhood, from that neighborhood,
Oh.
and the psychologist who worked with Turbot after his arrest and incarceration.
Okay.
So one thing he says is not all sex offenders are repeat offenders. And Stabes is like, you show me a first-time offender and I'll show you a guy who's never been caught before. Which, yeah.
Yeah. So I knew this woman in Colorado. She had her own practice. She was a therapist, a group therapist, and therapist for sex offenders, specifically child sex offenders. And in Colorado, she was trying to get me to get my take a class on doing what's that called, lie detecting, because there was only like 2 people in Colorado that did it. You can make a shit ton of money, and she has to give these these men lie detector tests every week.
Even though they're not admissible in court?
I don't know. That's just what
Crazy.
it was just part of like Colorado laws for them or something. So she had been doing her job for like 20 years and was like, hey, I hate them.
Yeah.
She's like, they don't. 9 out of 10 every time.
Oh.
9 out of 10. And she's like, there's that 1% whatever, but he's white knuckling it.
Right.
You know, she's like, they'd all do it.
So the precinct captain in this meeting is worked up that they expected more of them because he was like, so either we tell all the neighbors and they freak out, like, look at what happened. They didn't inform the neighbors when he moved in. And he also brings up that Bill Turbot was psychotic on drugs when he terribly raped this kid.
He was like overloaded on some sort of
right. So they're like using it as like a
psychedelic shit.
They're like, well, you know, he's talking about his reformation.
The boy was going door to door selling candy, and that's literally all that Bill or Turbot remembers.
Yeah. And then the psychologist or psychiatrist was like, I think it's psychologist. He was like, oh, this isn't the Bill Turbot I knew and blah, blah, blah. You know, I don't think this was him. And Benson and Stabler are like, yeah, you're going to know a different dude when he's in prison.
Yeah.
Like,
when you're,
it's going to be a different person.
When there's not bed checks and you're making your own meals, it's different.
Yeah.
So the kid was going door to door selling candy, and the neighbors heard screaming, but they were from Turbot.
Yeah.
He was like losing his shit. He thought the boy was dead and his
Yeah.
corpse was attacking him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the police found the boy unconscious on the floor. Turbot was a ball on the floor panicking.
Yeah.
But the kid was, when he went to the hospital, he had to like lie in his stomach for like weeks.
Yeah.
He like couldn't walk.
Yeah.
It's fucking awful.
So Turbot's lawyer and Stabler are doing a classic SVU walk and talk in the next scene.
Yeah.
Turbot's lawyer, I was like, who the fuck is she? Who is she? Who is she? She played Ross from Friends' ex-wife's partner. And she was who Ross's wife left him for. And it was like a joke that she was a lesbian now.
Yeah. The lawyer and Stabler are arguing about the legality of taking DNA samples from Turbot. There was DNA under the victim's fingernails. Turbot is fighting the doctors. Stabler tells him they have a court order, but he's afraid of needles and like flips out, and they end up having to hold him down.
Right. And this is where I'm like, are we supposed to feel bad for him?
Yeah. Okay, so now they're at the victim's parents' house again, the Davies house. Benson and Stabler are leaving. The mom does that whole like my girl thing.
Oh my God, that's what I put too.
Yeah. She's like, did you find his glasses? He can't see without them. And I put a little like frowny face.
I put a : my girl ?
Yeah. The like, he went to go find my mood ring. All the bees. Oh, so sad.
So then Stabler goes to meet his family at the park after this, and he walks up and he's like, they're like, hi, Dad. And he's like, where's Dickie, his son?
Mm-hmm. He's probably playing ball. Like,
and Stabler's head is in his job where it a lot of times gets stuck. So he kind of trots off like in that panicked parent. Oh, I'm just
this big old butt.
You know.
Yeah. Sorry. I don't know. I watched it twice, so.
I wasn't watching that. I was relating on a parent level.
I was like, look at that fat ass. I mean, go find your child.
But he's like kind of panic looking around, and then he sees him. He tears over to him. Dickie's playing football, and he picks him up and holds him. I can imagine that moment because I think about it all the time because I'm in constant fear that something happened to my kids. Mm-hmm. Stabler goes to the tavern, and
the bar, the tavern.
Stabler goes to the bar, the tavern.
Yeah.
He's there to clear Bill Turbot's alibi, and the bartender says that Bill Turbot is a paycheck drinker, and he comes in on payday and spends about half of his check. The bartender is verifying.
How do people do this in New York?
I have no fucking idea.
How do you...
And then have an apartment and then have a stamp collection?
And
like
work at a recycling center.
This isn't adding up.
He's like, I separate the plastics, the red, the green, the blue. And the... like,
she's like, oh my God, I fell asleep. What?
Tell me more about the stamp, please.
So as the bartender is verifying this dude's story, he's like, I have a little girl and I was up all night thinking about Ryan Davies. And Stabler's like, we all were, dude.
Right.
Like,
when he said that, I was like, he's lying.
Oh, yeah. So Stabes is like, was he playing cards with anyone? And he's like, nope. Actually, he left for a few hours and came back looking real upset. In my notes, I wrote, I think Stabes and I are on the same page when we wonder if this bartender is lying because Turbot is a chomo. Oops, I didn't.
Have you seen that SNL with The Rock?
Yes.
The child molester robot? How all these evil geniuses get together and she's like, I made a freeze ray. He's like, I made a child molesting robot. How do you... He's like, that dude gets... He's like, no! He's like, how do you even make a child molesting? He's like, well, you make the robot, then you molest it and hope it continues the cycle. I know. He's like, look, can we all just relax? and go to that restaurant that has a little tiny sandwich. It's like, it's a fucking White Castle. And then it turns into like a commercial for White Castle.
I forgot.
Bobby Moynihan's in it.
It's terrible.
It's so bad.
Oh my God.
He's like,
It's so bizarre how that can be so hilarious and this can be so heartbreaking.
he's like, Mussolini made people drink castor oil till they died. Like, that's where the goalposts are, right? Like, not a freeze ray. I'm going to turn Christmas in July.
Okay, so
Sorry.
Munch and Cassidy, they go to collect Turbitt's bike.
They're
And then
talking about how it's like to have kids.
they're both like, no thanks.
And we're both like, great.
Everybody's like, nobody wants either of you to have kids. Benson and Stabler are at the office of the medical examiner, and they're talking to a ponytailed forensic dude that we've never met before.
Yeah.
Turns out, oh my God, the dirt on the bike doesn't pinpoint the crime scene, just
Yeah.
the neighborhood. And
They're
we're like,
oh,
that
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. But they did find out that the bike chain, they held it up because the neck, they had a picture of the ligature marks life size, and they held the bike chain up to it. It was like a perfect match.
Yeah. And also, Olivia asks about Ryan's glasses, and I'm like, we're going somewhere with these glasses.
They have the bike chain that matches. They have 2 eyewitnesses, or the bartender can't account for Turbitt's whereabouts for 2 hours. So
And-
the ADA needs them to talk to Turbitt's victims, Christopher James. That's Turbitt's victim from 12 years ago, and to see if the MOs match, and then they can bring them in.
Right. And they're still waiting for the DNA from the chain, but because they have all of these other pieces of circumstantial
move.
evidence, they can go ahead and move forward.
So they're at the home of Christopher James.
Who lives with his mom.
Yeah. Benson needs to record his story. There was a little interaction I saw with Stabler that I didn't catch till the second time. When he walked in, Olivia like shakes his hand and
Oh,
and Stabler goes out, and the guy just kind of turns, and
He kinda-
Olivia like looks at Stabler and was like, "Get out of here!
Yeah.
I'm gonna handle this," because he obviously doesn't like men,
Yeah.
as he should,
right.
not like men, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
He tells Olivia his story so she can record it, and it's an awful story of the worst kind. Here's my notes. Gabe can tell it.
I was just gonna say, do you want me to do
Yeah,
it?
I can't do it.
So this kid, he went out alone, and his mom didn't want him to, but he insisted. He's like, "Because I'm a big boy now," and he was like 11 or something, right?
He was 9.
Okay. He had 4 chocolate bars left to sell, and so he had knocked on Turbitt's door, and Turbitt invited him in, and he went to use his bathroom. And when he came back out, Turbitt wanted him to play and like ride his back like a donkey, he said. So he took off his belt and used it as a harness. Christopher didn't want to, and when he refused, Turbitt wrapped the belt around his neck and forced him down on all fours and raped him while pulling the belt tighter and tighter till Christopher passed out. And he was like crying when he told, this guy was a really good little actor. So now they're at Turbitt's apartment. He's being arrested, and the neighborhood is clapping. Everybody is outside clapping. All of a sudden, the bartender shows up.
With his suit jacket over his shoulder,
He, like,
like
whips
he's
it around.
strolling up. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, Johnny Cash. Okay, Joaquin Phoenix, but 50 as Johnny Cash. I hated him.
Yeah. So he was like, look, I wasn't straightforward with you about the tavern. Like,
Also, this is where you don't go to the station house or anything like, hey, I need to admit that I lied. You like walk up to them arresting
Yeah.
This episode was so dumb and I hated
Yeah.
everything about
so
it.
he was like, dude, Turbitt was in the tavern playing cards the whole night. He said that because he wanted them to put him away because he thinks Turbitt will do it again to some other kid.
Yeah, and he's like, who cares?
Yeah,
It's-
but the bartender was an ex-cop, and he came clean because he couldn't deal with making a false statement to a fellow officer.
yeah, I bet.
Yeah. So they're at Cragen's office. Cragen says they can't hold him anymore. All the evidence that they have is hard to pin on Turbitt without the DNA.
Right.
It's all like circumstantial stuff.
And the prosecuting attorney is like, tough titties. You've got to cut him loose. Like, there's no legal way we can hold him now.
Yeah, especially with the bartender thing falling through, his alibi does check out now, you know?
His alibi checks out. The DNA doesn't match.
Yeah.
So then Cragen gets a phone call as they're like going back and forth on
The
this.
state attorney general, yeah.
He says to the prosecuting attorney, he's like, that was your boss, so hold him for just a minute, and I have to go down and talk to him.
Yeah.
So he goes to the office of the state attorney general. And
Morris Klein.
yeah, and he calls him Commissioner Morris, which we met Commissioner Morris. It's a different dude. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah, Commissioner Morris, before he was like, it's in the paper circular.
And this Commissioner Morris is Richard Nixon and George W. Bush had an adult older man baby.
Yeah.
Okay.
The baby was born 45.
Right, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So this is supposed to be Commissioner Morris.
He's a 20-year-old, 55-year-old, just exploring the world. Got out of his
This
parents'
fall on NBC. So the commissioner basically tells Cragen that they're trying to set up a thing where child molesters serve their time, and then they have a psychologist convince a judge that they're going to offend again and put them away in a hospital for the criminally insane for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And
it's called the civil commitment.
right. Cragen's like not here for it because he's like, they've served their time and blah, blah, blah. And this is the way
This
we
goes
have it
against,
laid
like,
out.
civil liberties, yeah.
Right, which is like, then let's go back and review that shit because we learn more and more all the time in the world of psychology and sciences and everything else. Our laws need to be adjusted based on that shit. You know what I mean? He disagrees with the commissioner, but gives him 24 hours to get his shit together for this deal. So then it cuts to Stabes picking up Dickie at school, and the kids are running around the park, and Dickie goes, looking for pedophiles, Dad?
Yeah.
And Stabes is like, what? And he's like, yeah, a kid told me that. Like, that's what you do because that's your job.
He's like, tell your little friend I'm a cop and that's my job or whatever. And he's like, you tell him yourself when you come and talk at my class. Will you talk at my class? You know, and
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, whatever. Dickie's a little bitch, though.
Oh my God.
They're at the precinct. Doctors are giving Turbot a psych eval. Cragen is pissed.
He doesn't like the situational ethics of the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. One of the therapist people is from where he went to prison, right?
Yes.
Like
who worked with him there. Yeah.
Yeah, because she's asking if he had remorse. She's asking about watching the videos of his apartment after, like, the crime scene photos and stuff. He said he didn't even recognize an apartment. There was, like, scratches on the wall. It had looked like an animal had been in his apartment. He said the drugs made him do terrible things, and she was like, was this a fantasy? And he was like, no, my biggest fantasy before that was imagining his neighbor taking off her blouse. And he says, like, there's not a day gone by that he hasn't felt remorse for what he did to that Christopher kid, but he doesn't remember a minute of it.
Yeah. So he sounds very convincing when he's telling this story, right? It's so hard to have compassion for that.
It's akin to, like, if some guy was fucked up out of his mind and, like, raped me or something, I'd be like, oh yeah, that totally sucks. Fuck you.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
oh, poor you. Oh my God, I'm so sorry that you. No, you have to. No. Like, and yeah, the guy did his time, and for the rest of his life, he has to, like, register, and he does it and whatever. But still, it's like, you saw that fucking kid.
Yeah. Look at what he's.
That's
What
his,
the rest of his
that's
life
his
is.
life because
Yeah.
you got fucked up once. Or whatever. Sorry. It's like it's an explanation, not a fucking excuse. Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Captain Cragen calls looking for the DNA results on the chain. Turbot's DNA didn't match the DNA found on Ryan.
This is
So
what I
Cragen's like, cut him loose.
I have, oh my God, was it those damn teenagers?
Those damn teenagers.
Yeah.
So the shrink talks to Cragen about the detectives testifying to Turbot's demeanor when they first interviewed him. Cragen's still arguing that he doesn't want him to go
He's
to...
like, you're going to put him away even though he didn't do it?
Yeah,
She says she considers it a preemptive strike.
right. And Cragen's like, what about chemical castration, Depo-Provera?
It's like, you really think that you can make book on it, Captain? Like,
Yeah.
she's like that Colorado lady. Like, she's just like, she knows that stuff's going to happen 9 out of 10 times and is like, this is the only thing that we have to keep our community safe. But you also can't, like, bust over people's civil liberties. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that child molesters don't have rights. Like, criminals don't have rights, except for felons. You know what I mean? Like,
This is so fun.
it's hard.
I hate this
It's
so much.
stupid. You just don't get to, like, if somebody does their time, we need to find an island.
Oh
where
my
they can,
God.
like, stay there.
That's been...
Like No Escape. The movie No Escape with Ray Liotta.
fucking love Ray Liotta.
Me too. He always looks like he's wearing an eyeliner, and I'm not sure if he is or not.
That's true. She's saying that civil commitment is the only option to make sure that he doesn't reoffend. All right. Turbot and his lawyer from Friends are leaving the precinct, and everyone is quietly staring at them, and it's just a super eerie vibe. And this isn't funny, but I'm sorry. The way Munch dorkily puts his balled up fists on his hips, like as he watches him leave the precinct.
Yeah. He's like,
His tall, lanky body, and then over his glasses watches him walk out.
he's like Gran Torino. Right. Hey there.
Yes. They're at Terry and Linda Davies' home. Ryan's glasses, question mark.
Yeah, she keeps asking about if they found Ryan's glasses.
The dad is blaming himself.
Yeah, they had to, like, tell them that the DNA didn't match Turbot. She's like, who else could it be? And we're like, well, now they're at Dickie's school. Stabler is finally talking in his class about his job. And he's, like, talking to them about child molesters and, like, how to avoid them and not believe them if they're play acting, you know, which is like, hey, your mom's sick. Get in my car.
Yeah.
Oh, and that little boy.
I know.
And he was like, if somebody is hurting you, go tell your mom and dad. And this little boy was like, what if it's your dad that's hurting you? And he, like, goes up to him
And gets
Gets
at
his-
like eye level with this
And
child.
was like, then you tell Dickie and Dickie will tell me.
Yeah.
So this kid's getting molested, right?
I've never felt more safe.
I know.
I think the kids were just asking questions because kids are curious.
Yeah.
And adults don't realize that like there's gaps in the finality of their statements.
Yeah.
So this is again with that like stranger danger shit. And even though that stuff is viable, like I remember being told that don't get into a car with somebody that says whatever, da 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 da. One time my aunt was coming to pick me up from school, but I didn't know she was coming to pick me up. And I just see her van pull up and I'm in like second grade. And whoever's in the back opens the door and they're like, hey, we're taking you back to our place. And then your mom's going to like come meet up with us later. Hop in. And I'm like, what's the password or whatever? And my aunt's like, get in the fucking car.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh.
It's good though that you were like, you
Yeah.
know.
Oh, but then I got in the car. Like all you had to do was like insist a little. And I'm like, okay.
So now they're at the Supreme Court. They're at the civil commitment hearing. Turbitt's lawyer is asking the psychiatrist at the prison if he was ever sexually violent with anyone at the prison. She says no. The lawyer says that Turbitt had done his time for the crime, and the therapist said that the crime has a likelihood of being repeated. The lawyer mentions that Turbitt was sane when he was convicted and served his time, and it's unconstitutional to now say he's insane and needs to be put away. The judge needs to consider everything and we'll be back tomorrow. Like he's like, I gotta think about all this shit. Pinson and Stabler are on the steps of the courthouse. So is the lawyer and Turbitt. And fucking Ryan Davies' dad comes up and shoots Turbitt a shit ton from close range.
Yeah.
And he like knows this isn't the guy, but he's like just pissed.
He's just like heartbreak raging out.
Yeah.
You know, and he knows that this guy has committed terrible acts, you know.
He's dead and he wasn't even the guy that did it. But honestly, he's probably better off because his life was going to be full of shit. He'd have to move.
And you're kind of left going like, how bad do I feel that this... it's so complicated.
I know.
So we're back at the precinct. There's a team meeting talking about Turbitt's murder.
They're
Cragen's
back to
like,
square one.
Yep. Cragen's like, not cool. And Stabler's like, I mean...
What are we going to do with the stamps?
Cassidy. Yeah. What is a stamp collection? It's like, fuck off, Cassidy. Why are you here?
Yeah.
So then they bring in Jimmy G, one of the two eyewitnesses placing Turbitt at the scene.
Yeah, they have to they're going to we're back to square one. We got to go back to the two witnesses.
Cassidy goes in to talk to him with his cringy cool dad vibes.
I know. He does the chair flip thing.
And he's like, puts a can down in front of him and he's like, soda.
No, he says cola. Yeah. Oh God, he's like trying to make the guy feel like we're just chilling, hanging out. And
Just
he's like
a couple of two cool dudes, two cool young hip dudes.
yeah, you know, he's like, oh, he's so creepy. And he's
Yo-yo
like,
MTV raps. Am I
Yeah.
right? So Jimmy G looks nervous. He doesn't seem to be able to answer simple questions. And Cassidy asks him specifically, did Turbitt ride his bike by the woods or by the river? And he's like, he rode by the woods. Cut to Munch with Mike D in for questioning. And Mike D says Turbitt rode by the river.
So their stories aren't matching up. They're like, get down to the riverside because they've like the wood side is where Ryan was found. So they freaking go and get some cops to go down to the riverside and look for stuff.
Yep. And they're also going to take blood for samples from these two dudes. So Stabler and Cassidy are walking by that part of the park being processed. I just want to make a quick note before we get through this is that at the beginning of the episode, Cragen had said, we're going to have forensics combing the marsh, combing that area. Stabler, I know you know where I'm going. Stabler and Cassidy.
This is like when she found that book.
Exactly. Stabler and Cassidy are talking about how tough the job is and how hard it is to let go after work, which, yeah. And there's all the forensics dudes and waiters with metal detectors, and they're looking along the river.
Literally with metal detectors.
Yes. They're looking for whatever caused the ligature marks on Ryan's neck because, remember, the DNA on the chain didn't match Ryan, right? So the metal detector beeps. Cassidy hops the fence by the marsh to see what they found, and he's like, oh, it's a quarter. And then Cassidy turns around. He's in 4-foot tall grasses, and he's like, "Whoa, what is this?"
Stabler, come on over here. Do you see how sexily Stabler jumped over the fence?
Like
Just
one-armed, yeah.
No, one foot. He like jumped up and like just used one foot to get over it.
Right. It's those butt muscles.
It's those butt muscles.
Yeah.
Can we make a t-shirt that says that? Stabler's butt. It's those butt muscles.
So after Cassidy all but cartoonishly trips, he goes down to pick up what he finds, which is Ryan's tiny wire-rimmed glasses that forensics was unable to find until Cassidy
They found a quarter.
Dumbledore's over them. they find a quarter.
They find a couple of quarters, it sounded like.
Yeah. Another quarter. Hey, how many quarters you got?
Gumballs are on me, guys.
So Forensics Ponytail has a giant box of a computer with fingerprints on it. This fingerprint is a partial from Ryan's glasses. They put in Jimmy G's fingerprint next to it, and the dude has a side-by-side, but he kind of just like, you know how when they do
I went like this and I watched his finger and I was like, none of this matches.
yeah, he like waves his finger back and forth for a second and a half and decides that it's a match. When they do forensics in cop shows now,
They're like,
they like lay the two fingerprints over top of each other, and then it's like these little squares that are like match, 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 match.
Yeah.
And they have to match up a bunch of things. Like a guy wagging his finger. This guy must be the guy in forensics if this is what it took for him to, it's a match.
maybe he has a tiny computer in his ponytail that connects to his eyes and does it for him.
He has, it's like in the movie
Terminator?
Avatar, in his ponytail, and he connected his ponytail to the computer.
And then they flew away.
and then they copulated him in the computer. They're along the river. A chain is found, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Turbot said one of his chains was stolen."
Yeah, we didn't mention that earlier, but he said that when he was talking about his fucking bike in the beginning, he was like, I think people are jealous of it because it gets moved and my bike chain was stolen.
Yeah.
So we're like, great, nobody's jealous of your fucking cruiser.
Benson and Stabler, they're with Forensics Ponytail. The DNA on the chain matches Ryan. Okay, the chain that they just found.
Yeah.
The tissue samples under Ryan's fingernails belong to one of the boys. Mm-hmm. Which one?
Yeah.
Cut to Benson and Stabler interrogating Jimmy G. Mm-hmm. And they're like, da-da-da-da-da. They use their cop tactics. Mike's going to tell us. So, boom, boom. Now they're questioning Mike D.
They're doing this like crossfade back and forth.
Yes.
Which is really effective. It's like emotional. You're like, damn.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Mike D's like, my mom, whenever I'd do something bad, she'd say, boys will be boys. But let's take a moment with that for everyone to just scream in their car.
Yeah.
Okay. Fuck your mom, Mike D. Now they're saying that they think Mike went along with Jimmy. They're saying this to Mike D. They're just trying to get whatever story they can out of either of the boys. Mm-hmm. Then they both decide to tell what they did. They found a site, quote unquote, off the web. Mm-hmm. It's the year 2000.
They said they were surfing.
We were surfing.
Yeah.
They found a sex offender website and found that Turbot lived in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. On the site, they said that it was super specific what Turbot had done to Christopher.
He said there was almost like directions.
Yeah. So they started fucking with Turbot, moving his bike, stealing his bike chain, and Mike D gets choked up saying Jimmy kept going on about the chain and what Turbot did with it. I hate this that I laughed super hard at stupid Jimmy, but so Olivia's like, what happened the Friday that Ryan disappeared? And Jimmy G is kind of cross-eyed but super intense, and he's staring ahead and he's like, we were in my garage smoking.
Yeah. They keep seeing Ryan like riding his bike back and forth. They kept making fun of him and saying like, how much candy did he have to sell to afford his bike?
Yeah.
So they took the bike chain and took Ryan to the marshes, like just goofing around, he kept saying, and his glasses fell off, and that's when Ryan like really freaked out, and Mike had to hold him down. Mike said it was awful. Then Jimmy said something really weird. He said, look, I'm not gay or anything, until he started screaming. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
I was like, wait, that made you gay, or are you just saying I'm not gay or anything, and then a different thought? Then he started screaming.
Yeah.
It was weird.
I don't know. But Jimmy G's version gets very sociopathic.
Yeah.
And Mike D is crying. So, like, it's clear, like,
Jimmy's fucked.
yeah, but they both did
He was
fucked up shit.
so he was screaming, and Jimmy took the bike chain to shut him up. And then he heard his neck snap. And then Jimmy said a kid was a loser anyways.
Yeah,
And Stabler was like, absolutely not amused.
right.
And that's the fucking end.
That's the end.
Yeah.
Yep.
This sucked.
So I have an exceptionally hard time with this subject, and I'm not like exclusively saying that it's me, but a lot of people do. This is one of the hardest crimes that decent people find to exist.
Shitty people. If you go to prison for this,
Everyone hates you.
Yeah.
Everyone in prison, people that murdered their mom are like, look at that piece of shit.
yeah.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know the prison hierarchy, but I know you're on the fucking bottom.
Yeah.
So originally I had decided I wasn't going to do a chaser for this episode because I tend to avoid this shit in general, but here we are. So this shit is real and we're going to cover it, or at least an angle of it.
Yeah.
Here we go.
I can't do that.
My favorite was okay. All right. Vigilante, a member of a self-appointed group of citizens who undertake law enforcement in their community without legal authority, typically because the legal agencies are thought to be inadequate.
Oh, I know what this is about. I was just for the third time reading about it this morning.
We're talking about Jason Christian Vukovich.
Yes.
Vukovich was born in Anchorage, Alaska in 1975. When he was 4 years old, he and his brother were adopted by their stepfather, Larry Lee Fulton. Vukovich recalls his home as a strict Christian one, attending 2 to 3 church services a week. This is a quote from a letter written by him. So you can imagine the horror and confusion I experienced when this man who adopted me began using the late night prayer sessions to molest me. He spent his adolescence being sexually and physically abused by this monster. At some point in his childhood, his older brother ran away from home. Vukovich was devastated and worried that his brother would abandon him in the terrible place that he was growing up in. His brother was eventually found and arrested as a runaway, but then his brother decided to tell the police about the abuse.
It's got to be so hard for people.
I mean, the physical abuse, because we're talking about like child molesters, I didn't go into there's so many details about the physical abuse he endured as a kid. Mm-hmm. It was awful. It was awful physical abuse. As a result of the investigation, the stepfather was convicted of second-degree abuse of a minor. Vukovich remembers that his family was said that the brother shouldn't have come forward, shouldn't have talked about it at all, shouldn't have reported him, and it should have been kept within the family.
They do that shit. They fucking circle the wagons and get all weird about shit like that.
So I say his name a lot throughout this because it's I can't.
You also love Russian names. So.
I do. As soon as I saw his name was Vukovich, I'm like, oh my God, Gabe's going to hate me. But he also recalls and regrets being questioned privately by the prosecutor. He says that he lied and downplayed the abuse, like a kid is supposed to know what to do in this situation. Like he really beats himself up for not being more forthcoming as a kid being questioned about this shit. Mm-hmm. So he says this, quote, I can attest that ultimately it didn't really matter what was said or done. His plea deal gave him a suspended sentence, not a single day spent in jail for beating and molesting his children.
That's how it is, isn't it?
After the conviction, his stepfather was told that he couldn't have contact with the abused, but then immediately following, his parents pulled him from school and picked up and moved them to Wasilla.
You mean his parents as in the stepfather and the mom?
Yes.
So the mom's still with the guy and stuff. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
Right. So they moved him to Wasilla and he was isolated in homeschool.
Wait, how was he not, if he wasn't allowed to have contact, how were they able to was it illegal? They crossed state lines with this kid?
No, they went from Anchorage to Wasilla and those are both in Alaska.
But they moved and he's not supposed to be around him.
Yep.
And the police didn't. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Audible shrug. He was isolated in homeschool. They decided to pull him from school completely. They homeschooled him and he received zero counseling, check-ins, follow-ups from the state, absolutely nothing. His brother ran away for good when Vukovich was 14, and by the time he was 16, he himself ran away. So his life then became about survival, self-loathing, and the penal system, basically.
Yeah, like teen runaways stuff.
Yep. When he first ran away, he went back the next day to get his stuff. His mom said something like, I'm not going to be an accessory to your life of sin. And so they left all of his shit for him in garbage bags out on the front porch. But
she'll be an accessory to...
Yep.
For her husband. Okay.
But they withheld his driver's license and his social security card. He took off, went to Seattle, had blue collar jobs. He ended up doing multiple stints in prison for minor crimes, including petty theft and driving without a license. So he was arrested for driving without a license 8 times.
Yeah.
When he found out that because he didn't have documentation that he needed to have for like working out of state at these jobs underage, he started stealing.
Yeah.
And it became a part of how he survived. He said this, quote, "Being a thief and a liar fit nicely with my lack of self-worth. My silent understanding was that I was worthless, a throwaway." So in 2006-ish, Vukovich moved back to Anchorage after spending his adult life in the what he calls the lower 48, what I think everybody in Alaska calls the continental U.S. that.
Yeah.
He wanted a fresh start, but soon found himself laid off and in prison for stealing credit cards. And after that, he had a parole violation for eluding, and that sent him through the revolving door back into prison for 3 more years.
How old was he at this time? Do you know? Was he still like a teen or?
No, he was in 2006. He was 31 when he went back to Anchorage.
Okay.
So he had been
Just doing this.
Yeah. When I say one of the huge parts of his life was self-loathing, like this guy never got any help for the trauma that he experienced his entire childhood. So he's like trying to function around that as an adult and just getting imprisoned.
Did he see his brother at all or anything?
I don't know. I don't have that information. There's no more information about his brother that I could find. So then it was the summer of 2016. Vukovich was 41. He was again attempting to live his life out of trouble and in a quiet community when he said he started hearing rumors of kids being molested, of men abusing their positions of power to hurt kids. He says, "I thought back to my experiences as a child and felt the overwhelming desire to act. So he began searching the local sex offender registry and began taking the law into his own hands. He got himself a notebook and he made a list. There were 3 names on that list. Charles Elby, his crime in 2002, sexual abuse of a minor 2. Andreas Barbosa was convicted of possession of child pornography in 2014, and Wesley Demarest. In 2006, he was convicted of attempted sexual abuse of a minor. At 9:30 a.m., June 25th, Vukovich knocked on Charles Alby's front door.
Shit, in the morning?
Alby reported that Vukovich instructed him to sit on his bed and slapped him in the face multiple times. Vukovich then told him he was there because Alby was a registered sex offender. He stole some shit from him and he left. 4 a.m., June 27th. Less than 48 hours later, Vukovich knocked on the door of Andreas Barbosa.
4 a.m.?
Yeah.
Whoa.
He threatened to, quote unquote, bash in his dome with a hammer, called him a pedophile, and punched Barbosa in the face numerous times, robbed him, and left.
Okay.
1 a.m., June 29th. Vukovich broke into Wesley Demarest's home through a window. Demarest's roommate recalls a man in a black leather jacket and shoulder-length hair standing behind him and instructing him to leave. Vukovich asked Demarest if he had his correct identity and if he was on the sex offender registry list. When Demarest confirmed it, Vukovich then asked if he felt he had paid for his crime. Demarest claimed that he felt he did. Vukovich disagreed and told him, "I'm an avenging angel. I'm going to mete out justice for the people you hurt." When Vukovich told Demarest to get down on his knees and lie on the bed, Demarest started swinging, so Vukovich beat him with a hammer until Demarest went unconscious.
Okay.
So I want to hit that avenging angel thing. That's straight out of the Bible. An avenging angel is like the angels that dole out justice for God. I'm quoting this article that I found on belief.net. I just looked up the
Totes legit.
I just looked up the avenging angels, but it just says there are a handful of cases in scripture that show angels carrying out the judgment of God upon humanity through violence. These angelic attacks are reminders of God's sovereign power, as well as the lengths he will go to in order to protect and guide humanity. I wonder how long he'd been like relating to that, or he had that in the back of his mind of like, that's something he heard about when he was a kid, going to church all that time, and then being like, somebody needs to do something. Like nobody came for me, you know?
Yeah.
So after Vukovich beat Demarest with a hammer until he went unconscious, Demarest woke up in a pool of blood and had multiple concussions, skull fractures, etc. And his roommate had already called 911.
Dude, hold on. Dude's roommate was there?
Yeah. When Vukovich came in, the roommate was the one who woke up and he was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Because he didn't knock on the door this time. He broke in because it was 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And he was like,
Just coming to beat up your roommate.
well,
Night.
that's why you like he had a very focused intention because he's like, "You should go."
Yeah.
And the guy's like, "Okay, bye." And he
Left and called 911.
left and called 911. Yeah.
Anyways.
So Demarest woke up in a pool of blood, blah, 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 blah. But I just wanted to remind everybody, like, yes, he was horribly beaten. I read all these articles. I saw pictures of, like, how terribly beaten he was. He had struggles to form a sentence. But he was convicted of attempted sexual abuse of a minor, which I found out that the girl was in kindergarten.
Oh, my God.
Yep. And in all these fucking interviews, this piece of shit was like, "I paid for my crime and I this and this and that."
What does it mean attempted? Like did he like kidnap her or something?
I don't don't know. I couldn't find any details. I randomly found out that she was in kindergarten. So some of the things that Vukovich had stolen from these dudes include a laptop and a truck.
Like a toy truck or an entire truck?
He drove off with the second dude's truck.
Okay, cool.
The child porn dude. He's like, bye, I'm taking your fucking truck. So not long after Damaris' roommate called 911, the police found Vukovich in his car with his notebook containing the 3 names, his hammer, and many of the stolen items. Vukovich was arrested. He initially pled not guilty. In a letter, he said, quote, grown men who suffer physical wounds will heal. Children who are maligned physically, spiritually, and emotionally grow up but never become what they could have been. A molested or beaten child automatically receives a life sentence. There is no release date.
I mean, true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. He goes on to propose that he will willingly serve back to back the combined sentences of the 3 men he attacked in addition to what his own stepfather served. 8 years and 9 months.
That's the combined?
Combined. 4 dudes. 4 dudes.
What the fuck, dude? That is insane to me. Mm-hmm. Okay. Why? Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Why can somebody get like 5 years for trying to put their fucking kid into the wrong school in the wrong district?
Yeah.
And a guy who can literally ruin a child's entire life? Oh, I can't. Okay.
Yeah. I've said it before. Our most vulnerable population are not protected.
Across the board.
Yeah. I read more articles with this fucking Damaris dude, and he's like, I don't think that our addresses or places of work should be on the registry and blah, blah, blah. They don't list exact addresses anymore, at least not in Alaska. Vukovich goes on to say, I realize no organized modern society can tolerate vigilantism. However, no reasonable court can think that justice is served when someone who allegedly assaulted 3 convicted child molesters is expected to serve 4 or 5 times as long in prison as they did, combined. Again, state of Alaska, 8 years, 9 months. I'll sign on the line tomorrow. Instant, low-cost resolution. Justice, you decide.
Dude, that's awesome that he's like, I realize that like no society can have vigilantism, but no society can also allow like 3 months where somebody...
How is the...
Yeah.
Pun intended, hammer coming down on this guy for his crime when...
And he's 100% completely aware that it was like wrong.
Yeah, it's all what's on paper, which is that shit
Yeah.
needs to be fucking changed. So people went ape for this dude, right? Like
Yeah.
people followed it close because a lot of people were like...
I was just reading more about it this morning.
I know. I thought it was a really recent thing.
I thought it was too.
No, in 2018 is when he received his sentence. But so people went ape for this dude, but this is not the movies. So a year and a half later, he cut a deal and agreed to plead guilty to first-degree attempted assault and a consolidated count of first-degree robbery. The deal from prosecutors was that they would dismiss more than a dozen other charges against him. He then wrote another letter claiming that he now regrets his actions because he doesn't want to influence others to take the actions that he did. So in that letter, he said, I want my story to serve as a deterrent. My choices led me to where I currently sit, looking at 20 years in prison. If you have already lost your youth like me due to a child abuser, please do not throw away your present and your future by committing acts of violence. There are many kind and loving things we can do to protect children. He closes the letter by saying, I urge anyone who reads this to engage the proper channels to effect positive change. Do not glamorize my actions. Believe me when I say there is nothing glamorous about my life now. So then
This guy, he's extremely like self-aware and
Yeah.
like thoughtful about everything that happened.
He
and like
is.
articulates it very well. Because there's things where I'm like, vigilantism, but like also that was rad. And then he like answers the thought I had in my head. You know?
Yeah. So then in 2018, he received a 23-year sentence. And then I read somewhere that he would be eligible for parole or he could apply for it after 6 years. So I don't know what that means. I don't know if there's any sort of like support for him.
Did his past being in prison and stuff affect the
Yes.
amount? Yeah, okay.
They said that you've nonstop been in and out of prison. And it's like, you know why?
But if they're just
Or do
going to
you-
go by the law,
And that is what they're going to do.
but it's also, like he said, the law.
He's like a textbook example of cyclical crime.
But like he said, the law was like, yeah, I'll do all the time. Like, it's not okay to do vigilantism, but it's fucking not okay to get 2 months for raping a child or whatever.
Yeah. If you go to the episode on our website, svupod, you can read his 5-page letter in full, along with all of the other source material for this chaser. But that's where I got a lot of this information was his second letter that he wrote.
Yeah.
Now, I think This is me speculating. He could really have sat in prison and been like, fuck, man, like, I can't handle this, 20 years, and really thought back on it and regretted his actions. But he also wrote that letter prior to his sentencing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if his lawyer was like, it would be a really good idea, since they're not going to give you your deal. Here's the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them you're sorry. Start now, so that in 6 years after you get convicted, you might get out. So Demarest, the guy who got it the worst, is no longer on the Alaska sex offender registry.
Why? This is the 5-year-old, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I always thought that the sex offender registry was a
Me too.
lifetime thing. This guy had 15 years on it, and that has just come up, and I could not find him anywhere on the sex offender registry.
Weird. I didn't know that.
Again, state by state, probably. So that's it. That's
Wow, what a bummer. Tell your therapist to fuck off.
Jason Christian Vukovich. I
it's
don't want to
Russian-
talk about my therapist on here. What if she listens? I always try to get her to laugh at my jokes, and then I'm like, are you sitting there going, "Ugh, I wish we could be friends, but it's not professional." That's how strongly I need to be liked.
If you think that I don't do that with every single person I tattoo,
You're going to leave here just like wishing we could keep this hang going. I said that to a therapist one time before I had this therapist. Like, I was in the middle of telling her some dark shit, and I was like, it's really hard for me to be fully honest with you right now, because I have such a crippling need to be liked that, like, I want to tell this story in a version that makes you continue to like me. And
Yeah.
her eyes widened in a way that I wasn't expecting. And I was like, oh my God, am I a psychopath?
no,
No.
not at all. You have too much empathy.
I don't know. That's the end. Love ya. Bye.
Bye. Love you. Bye. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at SVUPod.
And we also have a Facebook group, SVU Pod. Email us at svupod@gmail.com. We also have a website, svupod, especiallyheinous.com.
Check it out. Check them all out.
Check it out, Gabe. I was hoping that you would know that was your cue to. All right. Love you. Bye.
What do you mean?
Like, our demo is not straight white dudes. I love you, husband.
Yeah.
Not Gabriel. He's like a songy angel.
Oh, he's the one that was like, hey, Mary, you're pregnant.
Yeah.
She's like, I know, I'm a prostitute. Leave that in.
I'm going to.
Good.
You know what, guys? We're going to start a Patreon for stamp content. I want you to do a Stabler pinup.
Why have I never thought of that?
I don't know. But you never notice when he rolls up his sleeves, they're super high rolled up.
Yeah.
Like, how are your sleeves
They're past the elbow. Like, I know you're ripped.
like way past the elbow?
Do you have them tailored where you, like, you take all the arms out?
Oh, I'd take that waist in.
Perfect V.
Fucking Mighty Ducks ass V.